My vote is for personal accountability. And so I want to talk about the most powerful person in the world, that person being you. I think that we as individuals should focus far less on what's going on in the White House, because I think the real change that's going to come into our life will come from focusing on our house and what goes on with the people that we have a direct influence over. Also, we vote every 2 years and every 4 years, depending on the position. But I think it's extremely important for us to acknowledge that we actually vote every single day because we spend every single day. And you will find that politicians change seats, change positions, change words every year, every 2 years, every 4 years, whatever the pace may be. But the people who are amassing wealth just continue to become more powerful and more influential. Essentially, if politicians are the children, then the parents who feed them are the business owners. So I think it's really important to focus as every dollar that you work so hard for goes out into the world in whatever direction. I think it's extremely important to make sure that your money is going towards something that you truly feel passionate about. And I would ask all of you to spend a little bit more time thinking about every transaction because some of the transactions that were happening are limiting, if not completely eliminating the amount of interactions that we can have. So, for instance, we look to these politicians and we say it would be great if you could work towards lowering the cost of medication, right? And there's an increase in the amount of people who are purchasing medications that help uh, essentially to sedate us, to make people numb. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry for us to feel very sedated and very sort of away from our regular life. The vast majority of the medications that we have are due to lack of focus or an increase in anxiety. And yet we go into a restaurant that has 14 televisions, all blaring different images. Of course, we grow up in that environment. We are nourishing ourselves in that environment. Just using a restaurant as an example, of course, we're going to have trouble focusing. We live in a society where we are constantly condemned on a personal and social level for shining our light, as Sky was mentioning earlier. So, of course, people are going to want to numb themselves to those sort of emotions that bring a sense of anxiety. So, as with many of the things that I mentioned here, I think we have to focus on the source. And you are the center of your world. Each and every one of you are the center of your existence because everything comes out from you and comes back to you. That isn't being overly philosophical, that is quite literal. And we talk constantly about the increase in healthcare costs. We want for the we want the ability to be able to increase the amount of times that we visit the hospital or a decrease in our copays or insurance costs. But we can all, to a certain extent, acknowledge that we have become an increasingly sedentary lifestyle. If you look at a vast majority of the most profitable companies, they are amassing millions upon millions of dollars by providing additional comfort and ease within our home. Essentially, the goal of most lucrative companies is to get you on your couch and to comfortably keep you there, knowing that the increase in consumption, the lowering, if we are not burning calories, then we are going to find ourselves susceptible to type 2 diabetes and heart disease. Again, it starts with us. We hear constantly about our nation's debt, how much we owe to other countries. We ask politicians, well, what will you do about the 4.8, the 5.1? I mean, numbers that are just astonishing that you can't even view on a screen. But each one of us as individuals, if we look at the nation that represents us on an individual basis, it's fair to say that many of us have become far too comfortable spending money we don't actually need. I mean, spending money we don't actually have on things that we don't need, amassing tons and tons of credit card debt. And the idea of the credit card system initially came about for emergency unexpected costs, but we are in a premeditated manner using our credit cards to buy things that cause us not to have enough of readily available funds if there's an actual emergency situation. Every candidate on any level loves to talk about education because for whether you are a parent, I mean, any one of us have been a child, so we know what it was like to be part of the education system. And yet, I don't know about you, but I go to coffee shops, I go to restaurants, and I'm seeing parents, rather than educating their kids or interacting with their children, buying them $1,200 tablets. Again, these are the same parents who will end up saying that their child has ADHD and needs medication because they can't focus. But science has already shown that a vast majority of those cases come from children who had to take it upon themselves to keep themselves busy because the main point of interaction that they wanted with their mother and father wasn't there. And so, in lieu of that, they look for these various devices, none of which provided enough. So, naturally, they end up going to 10, 12 different things when all they really wanted was eye contact with their parents and a hug. We talk about parks. Speaking about children, I mean, any one of us loves the idea of having more green grass to drive along and more beautiful trees and beautiful parks and to hear children laughing and giggling. But as stated before, a vast majority of these kids they're not being given toys that require physical direct interaction. They're being given devices or streaming services. Their education is associated with the same television that's associated with their entertainment. And so they can't filter the difference between the two. And so everything educational has to be entertaining. But we all know, I mean, it's nourishing as far as knowledge is no different than a meal. Green beans are extremely healthy to our body, but they're not necessarily covered in sugar. And so we're talking about visual consumption. It's the same as physical consumption. I don't know if any of you know what a pulmonary embolism is. Essentially, a pulmonary embolism is when, due to long bouts of complete inactivity, you end up developing blood clots and your heart shuts down and you die immediately. Feel free to look it up afterwards. Pulmonary embolism has killed thousands and thousands of teenagers who are sitting online playing video games. These are 16, 17-year-olds, haven't even finished high school. And before you know it, they're playing Call of Duty and collapse on the couch. I understand that parents, to a certain extent, in purchasing these items, did what they thought the child would want. And there's this illusion that my child is safer if they're home. But if the money you pay to entertain your child causes their demise in your own home, it takes toll on you. And the best thing you can do is to pause. And again, like I said in the very beginning, remember that your dollar has more impact than your vote. Here in New Orleans and in every major city, people are always talking about there's this huge bill about improving our roadways. So let me understand. People want smoother roads so they can drive on them faster, and they want more lanes so they can be more cars per square foot. But what that's going to do indisputably is increase the amount of accidents that take place because right now, if these roadways are so constrained, these cars can't go faster than 35 or 40, then they hit 50, 60, they're exponentially increasing the likelihood of getting into an accident because they have less time to react. I mean, it's a fourth of most motorists are driving without any insurance, but 70% of those drivers have a phone that's worth more than $1,100. People say they can't pay their car insurance, but they have $1,100 for the very device that's responsible for 1/6 of the accidents. I don't know if what I'm saying is news to any of you. I don't know if what I'm saying comes across as controversial because these are just daily things. These are part of our everyday life. I think if there is something that's unsettling, It's the fact that it takes away our ignorance. And so, with a certain level of knowledge comes, if not at least subtle, a heightened level of accountability. In other words, if you don't know, you can't do anything about it. But if someone empowers you with knowledge, there's a sense of accountability that now that you know, what will you do with it? As an example, if there was a building on fire 8 blocks from where you're all seated, but you didn't know about it, then you don't know to rescue anyone from the fire. You don't know to warn anyone not to approach the fire. But now that you know the fire is burning, what will you do with that knowledge? We talk about the crime rate and we want people have different methodologies. Is that green, yellow, or red?
Green.
I'm sorry.
That's
Thank you.
green.
Okay. All right. So we talk about different methodologies when it comes to decreasing the crime. If you look at the situation that has arisen in the last 10 years, there's this mass shooting. A vast majority of those mass shootings, when we look into the person, because sadly many of them can't speak for themselves afterward because of how they're subdued. But if you look at a vast majority of the incidents with the mass shootings, these were people pleading for help. These were people with mental health issues. These were people who felt isolated. These were people who didn't have friends, described as quiet loners. So if any politician was to say to you as civilians, if you want to decrease crime, you need to increase your friendships. If you knew for a fact that there would be less crime if you were just a little bit friendlier, would you do it? Do any of us want crime to be reduced bad enough to make a positive impact? I mean, I don't know. The truth of the matter is that none of these politicians will ever personally speak with you. They will never have dinner with you at home. They won't sit beside you at a movie theater. But the sad reality is that we're becoming so divisive that we're eating alone instead of with family and friends because of what politicians they support. We are preferring to be alone rather than the company of people who challenge some of our opinions. In other words, we are eliminating the beautiful friendships with people who have helped us through this world because of how they feel about complete strangers that will never actually be part of ours. I think it's important that we focus less on the left and the right. And I think it's more important that we focus on doing what's right, or there won't be anything left. You are the most powerful person in the world. I hope you know that. Thank you.